Hey y'all, welcome back to the Free Black Women's Library YouTube channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Thank you for liking this video and thank you for subscribing to my channel. Oh, welcome back, y'all. Welcome back to another Rambly reaction. So as y'all know, I like to do my Rambly reactions on TV shows, films, and books that center Black women, are created by Black women, or about Black women in some type of way. So this particular series is a little off the beaten path for me, but once I start to talk about it, you'll understand my reasons why I decided to do recaps of this series. But yeah, without further ado, it is called The Gilded Age, and it is currently streaming on HBO, and new episodes air every Monday night at 9 p.m. And there have been 5 episodes so far, but I'm gonna do a video about each episode and I'm gonna try to catch up before episode 6 is out. So we'll see how this goes. So the name of the show is Gilded Age, and it is created, directed, and produced by Sir Julian Fellowes. Now, this is the same person that brought us the iconic series called Downton Abbey, which was on PBS for several years. Now, total disclaimer, I'm gonna say up front that Downton Abbey was one of my favorite shows and still is one of my favorite shows of all time. Like it hasn't lost its flavor. You know how some shows you love them and then you go back to rewatch and you're like, why did I like this? That did not happen with me with Downton Abbey. I have watched the series repeatedly over the years, and I still love it. I still find it amusing. I still find it charming. I still find it interesting, and I still find it absolutely beautiful. I am a wannabe historian. I'm also very much into set design and costumes. I'm really into like the visual aesthetics that go into making film and TV, especially when it comes to period pieces. So I love Downton Abbey for that reason. I also thought the acting was splendid. And I also enjoyed the characters like Bates, Carson, Mary, Edith, Sybil, Lord Grantham, the Countess, the Dowager. Like, I could go on and on. Just as I already have, like Downton Abbey was my ish, okay? So Julian Fellowes has a new show out, and a lot of people are saying that The Gilded Age is kind of like Downton Abbey, but set in New York. And I'm not sure how I feel about that because I would like some new content, but I'm also kind of okay with the old content being recycled because I did enjoy the old content, but I feel like there should definitely be some new flavor because we're in New York and it's also a different era. Now, those of you who are familiar with Downton Abbey, y'all know that it started out in 1900s, whereas the Gilded Age begins in 1882. Now, the actual real Gilded Age was between 1870 and 1900. So when the show begins, we're right at the very midpoint, like that expansive point. And the Gilded Age was known as this time period when the American, it's kind of like a coming of age time period for America. Like there's a lot of economic growth, there's a lot of expansion, industrialization, like the railroad industry was popping off, the copper industry was popping off, the coal mine industry was popping off. Like there was a lot of money being made, a lot of action happening in the US, like things were really starting to pop, especially in New York. So that's where this time period takes place. But it's kind of a little shady because when something is gilded, that just means that it's covered with a thin layer of gold, and underneath it, underneath that gild is not as beautiful and not as pretty. So in a way, we're saying this is a time period when everything was like lavish and lush and performatively gorgeous, but deep down things were kind of like cruddy and messy. And That is definitely true, because as there were people who were becoming millionaires, there was a lot of struggle and a lot of poverty, and ghettos were being formed. So yeah, there's like this extreme, and that social hierarchy is something that I really find fascinating. And I think that's another reason why I enjoy Downton Abbey, is because you had like that upstairs downstairs dynamic, and you had like that very, very rich dynamic interacting with very, very poor, and like those like culture clashes that take place between the two classes. But anywho, let's get into the episode, because I don't want to talk too much. I don't want my videos about this series to be too long. And yeah, let's make it happen. So in episode 1, as I said, it starts out in 1882. We see this shot of Central Park. During this time period, something that was not mentioned at all in the series is that for them to create Central Park, they actually had to displace Seneca Village, which was a settlement for African American folks who were Black folks. During this time period, they actually like displaced like all these Black people. And it was very violent and very fucked up. But of course, Mr. Fellowes is not going to talk about that. I mean, it's kind of a lot that he has a Black character that seems like she might get a storyline. So anywho, it's Central Park, it's Fifth Avenue. For those of y'all who are familiar with New York, you know that Central Park kind of like starts around 59th Street, but we're on 61st, right? And there's this mansion, across the street is a brownstone. In the mansion, ours is a family, the Russell family, Bertha, George, Gladys, and Larry. And they're moving into this amazing house that was designed by an architect named Stuart White. Now, one of the things I enjoy about Julian Fellowes as a wannabe historian is that he likes to incorporate like real facts and real people into his series. And Stuart White was an actual real architect who did a lot of work during this time period, and became somewhat famous and became somewhat of like a go-to. And he did like a lot of incredible buildings, but it took him some time to get there. Like, you know, he was part of like this new this new trend of architects, right? So he's got the mansion. Across the street, we have Ada Brooke and Agnes Van Ryn, two sisters, and they're giving Julian Fellowes kind of archetype characters, right? Like Ada is kind of cute. She's giving like Rose Nyland from Golden Girls kind of vibe, like a little bit spacey, a little bit playful and cute. She's a spinster, and Agnes is giving like the dowager, very kind of quips and put downs, and very, you know, abrupt, blunt, and, you know, hoity-toity and cold and snooty, right? So they're two sisters. They live across the street from the Russells. They're in a townhouse. The Russells are in a mansion. So we see a snip of them. And the thing about pilots is that they introduce you to the characters, and they kind of lay down a foundation for you for the story. So we kind of get an idea of these two families immediately, and like the little bit of tension that might exist between them, because they're sneaking looks at each other and not really speaking. And then we meet Marion. Now, Marion Brooke is an orphan, right? We don't know what happened to her mom, but her father just died. She's meeting with her lawyer, and the lawyer's like, boo, your father left you nothing. You're broke. So you need to go live with your rich aunts in New York, because there's nothing for you here in Pennsylvania. And she's kind of shocked. And this actress is Meryl Streep's daughter. And unfortunately, I'm not really sure what's happening with this character just yet. But I think that she's supposed to represent the audience. She's kind of like the Alice. Let's say this is the Wonderland. She's falling down the rabbit hole. Like she represents like the audience's eyes and ears, and kind of like developing understandings about the ways of these people that she's supposed to be living with. But you know, the lawyer, I can already see that they're trying to like have this romance between these two. Like it's just, they're broadcasting that right off the bat. And I don't know how I feel about that either. But anywho, so she believes him. She's got $30 left to her name. She has to pack up the house and she's gonna go live with her aunts in New York. Like they're excited. Ada's excited that she's coming. Agnes, not so sure. She's kind of like who's supposed to take care of her? I'm already taking care of you. And you know, if it wasn't for me, we'd be homeless. And like Henry, who's their brother, who's Marion's father, they don't have good vibes about him. They're not really mourning his death. Apparently, he's the reason why they have nothing, because he gambled his money. He spent his money on beer and women. Like they don't have good things to say about Henry. But Marion loves her daddy, so there's going to be some conflict there with that. The lawyer, Mr. Rakes, takes her to the train station and they say their goodbyes. And once again, there's this moment of possible romantic tension. And I don't know, I'm not feeling it. Something about Mr. Rakes, I don't really trust. I don't know what it is, but I get weird vibes from him. Either way, he leaves and Marion is there and she sits next to this Black woman, and there's a fight that breaks out, and there's, in the midst of the commotion and the fight, her purse gets stolen and the train shows up. Now in her purse were her train tickets and her money. And she's like telling the conductor, I lost my train ticket. And he's like, well, no ticket, you can't get on the train. And she goes over to Peggy Scott and she says to Peggy, at this point, we don't know Peggy's name yet, but Peggy's like impeccably dressed. And she says, did you happen to see a purse? And Peggy's like, no. And I was like, I hope she's not going to accuse this Black woman of stealing her purse, because this is the 1880s, okay? And y'all know, even in 2022, Black people are criminalized for every damn thing. But no, that Marion's not on that. She just wants to get to New York. And Peggy's like, I'm sorry, no, I didn't see your purse. And she's like, okay, well, you know, thanks for your trouble. I guess you can go ahead and get on the train now. And Peggy's like, well, I have to get seated on last. So Marion says, oh, I see. And she sits down and she starts crying. And Peggy feels bad, so she buys her a train ticket. But of course, she can only buy her a train ticket for the colored section of the car. So Marion and Peggy, they ride to New York together, the beginning of their trip to New York together. And while they're headed there, they kind of bond a little bit. Turns out that Peggy Scott family lives in Brooklyn. And this is 1882. So the Brooklyn Bridge was built in 1883. So that's another reason why I like shows like this, because I get to learn about the history of New York and what was happening in the world at that time. So if you wanted to go to Brooklyn before 1883, you had to take a ferry, you had to take a boat, because there was no bridge. So, you know, as they're traveling, the weather's getting worse and worse, the sky's getting dark, the clouds, everything. So by the time they land where they need to like part, it's like pouring rain, and the boat that takes you to Brooklyn is not running because it's just like the weather is not good. So Marion convinces Peggy to come home with her to where her aunts are. Now, this is the part that kind of felt like there are some aspects of the show that feel unrealistic in terms of like how Peggy is treated, because like this is 1882, like racism was violent. Like people like this country was violently racist at this time, and not to mention the fact that she's a woman, you know, but I'm gonna suspend disbelief. And you know, Peggy gets like these side eyes from different people. She gets side eyes from the conductor, the taxi cab driver, but he doesn't say anything. And I was just like, would it be that easy? Okay. I have a little faith in this country's history as far as like how Black people were treated, and the fact that Peggy is able to go all the way to New York with Marion and not really suffer any real consequence felt a little unrealistic to me. But I don't need to or want to see Peggy deal with any type of racial trauma, so it's fine. So we get to the house of the sisters, Agnes and Ada, and Marion tells them about the whole story about how Peggy like saved her during that fight when her purse was stolen. She ripped Peggy's dress by mistake, how Peggy paid for her ticket. And Agnes is like, there's a colored woman downstairs who paid for your train ticket. You expect me to believe this? And Marion's like, well, I don't know. You don't have to believe it, but it's true. And I can understand why Agnes doesn't believe it, but either way, it's true. It is what happened. So, you know, so they're like, okay, Peggy can stay the night. She can't get to Brooklyn tonight. It's too much. The weather is too much. So Agnes does something which I thought was very proper. She tells Peggy, give me the information of your parents, of your family, in case anything happens to you. I have a way of contacting them because I know who they are. And Peggy's like resistant, and she's like, no one's staying in my house unless I know who their parents are. And I was like, yeah, that's actually needs to be a rule all the time. And she writes it down, and then she gives it to Agnes, and Agnes is like, ooh, where'd you learn how to write like this? And Peggy's like, at the Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia. Now, boom, this was also a real place, just like Stuart White was a real architect. And just like there was no bridge to Brooklyn in 1882, the Institute for Colored Youth was an actual real place. It was one of the first schools in the country that allowed Black people to go to school and like read and write and everything. So it turns out Peggy was a student there, and she not only learned how to read and write, she has beautiful handwriting, and she also learned Pitman shorthand, which is a type of like secretarial practice. So, you know, Agnes is impressed. She loves Peggy's handwriting, and she's like, interesting. And it turns out that their family were patrons of the Institute. They were part of the people that founded it. They were on the board. They raised the money. So, and this is giving me like pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of Negro type of politic mentality. She's giving like talented 10th type of vibes. And yeah, so either way, they're not liberal, like they're not progressive, because Peggy still has to eat downstairs with the servants. Notice Marion doesn't say anything about that. And the servants are acting all weird with her. One of the maids is like, oh, they've been coming up here taking our jobs. And I was like, that was a weird line, but I understood the point of it, because I know that there was a time period in this country when it was like the Irish were in contention with Black people, because it was like lower wage jobs, servant jobs, where they were kind of like competing for those two things. I have my notes here. I just want to check, make sure I haven't missed anything. Okay, so yes. Um, oh, I want to mention one of my favorite lines when Agnes says to Ada, "You were allowed the pure and tranquil life of a spinster." Like, that is such a Julian Fellowes line. Like, I've never imagined such a positive spin on the idea of the spinster. I really enjoyed that one. So either way, so Peggy is invited to stay and she stays. Now, while all this stuff is going on with Peggy and Marion and Agnes and Ada, across the street, we have the Russells. Now, the Russells are interesting because they are uber rich, like they are crazy, filthy, filthy rich. But they're also what is considered new New York, right? Their families didn't come here on the Mayflower. They rose up out of poverty, right? They weren't born wealthy. They weren't born high class. They're not part of new society, old society, but they want to be. Or at least Bertha Russell wants to be. Like, they want, like, Bertha Russell's a social climber, right? She wants to be included with all the fancy socialites. She wants to be a part of that world. And they're not really trying to accept her. And she thinks she can like push her way in and force her way in. She feels like, why not? Why can't I be? And the thing I don't really like, I like Bertha, but I also don't like her at the same time. So I'm enjoying that push-pull of that character because she is completely abandoned her old circle of friends. She's completely rejected like everything that was part of her old life. And she wants all these new women to be her friends. So I don't like that part of her. Like, I like that she's like a go-getter and she's very determined. She's very confident, but I don't like that she is like has these rose-colored glasses on and she's so like desperate to be a part of this club. Like her husband says, why do we want to be a member of a club? Why do you want to be part of a club that is not interested in us having us as members? Like, I have more money than them and you have everything better than them, but she's trying to set up, she makes this excuse like, oh, this will be good for the kids. Her son Larry, her daughter Gladys, she wants them to be accepted. And I don't know. I'm like, Bertha, I don't know, girl. Like, is it worth it? You want to be friends with these phony ass women, these fake women? Okay, whatever. So, so she decides that she wants to have like an at home. And that means not a formal party, just a way for people to like come and check out the house and talk to people and stuff like that. But before that happens, she goes to this charity event where they're trying to raise money to train orphans to be servants. Like, hello? It is like, it could be much worse. I'm like, training orphans to be servants? Like, how could it be much worse? They don't got no mama, no daddy, and you want to train them to serve you? Like, what's worse? I guess them being street urchins or homeless? I guess, girl. But yeah. So, anywho, oh, I wrote down Peggy is gorgeous. That's what I have. One of the things I have in my notes. I think Peggy is beautiful. I love this character, but either way. So at the charity thing, we get to see Bertha and her daughter interact with Aurora Fane and Anne Morris, who are two of the key pillars in this like society. And they're very shady towards her. They're very like, oh, that big house. Like, Bertha's very proud of her house. It's very like gorgeous. It's got all these like beautiful artifacts and like paintings and beautiful fabric and a huge ballroom. Like, she's very proud of her house. She took a long time putting it together and it is absolutely stunning. And she wants to have them over so they can look at it. And they pretend like, oh, they've been so intrigued by this house and watching it go up. But there's like an undertone of condescension to everything that they're saying. And I don't know if she doesn't catch the tea or if she just ignores it. It seems like she just ignores it, you know, but they're not feeling her. And it just feels very mean and very high school. Like they're giving like mean girl energy. So, you know, Ada and Marion come in and they're super nice to Ada and Marion. Like Aurora's like, oh, rain, it's raining mana. Like she's so excited. Meanwhile, her energy towards Bertha and her daughter was so like low key. So I'm like, oh girl, Bertha child. So, you know, Bertha decides she's gonna have this at home and 200 people are coming. Her French chef is like flittering all around the place. You know, everybody's all excited and nobody really ends up showing up except for Marion, who sneaks out the house while Peggy stands watch and she like runs across the street, you know, because she's, you know, she wanted to see the house and she wanted to be nice. And she said she liked Marion, she liked Gladys. So she goes over there. She only stays for a minute. And Bertha's kind of mean to her because she's frustrated. Aurora comes and she only stays for like 5 minutes. Annie doesn't come, like nobody comes, you know. Stuart White, the architect, comes because George says, oh, we want you to come just in case people have questions about the house. Anybody have questions about that house, girl? It was all this food. They had to pack it up and give it to the poor, like lobster salad. Ooh, child. So, you know, I kind of felt bad for Bertha because inviting all these people to your house and being all excited because you think you're going to make a whole bunch of new friends and then none of them show up is very sad. But at the same time, I don't understand why she felt like they were going to come to her house. Like they were not nice to her when she first met them. So that was weird. And she's in bed crying and she's like, they're going to be so sorry. They snubbed me. I'll make them pay. And her husband's like, I know you will, dear. Defeat is definitely not your color. And I know you're going to, you know, you're going to rise up from this. So one of the things I love about George and Bertha is they complement each other so well. Like they're a power couple. George is confident and cocky and self-assured. He's ruthless. He's hardcore. He's a hardcore businessman. He's a millionaire, okay? And he loves his wife. He loves his children. He's very giving. He's very supportive. He's very playful with them. But at the same time, I don't know, there's something about him that worries me a little bit because he has like these moments of like cruelty and they don't seem like overly deliberate, but it's definitely there. And his character is actually based on a real person as well. Someone named Jay Gould, who's supposed to be a ruthless businessman, but a loving husband and father at the same time. So I thought that was interesting. But I do love them as a couple. And the thing that worries me about the Gilded Age in comparison to Downton Abbey is that the Gilded Age has so many more characters and plot lines that I'm worried that it's going to get like messy and complicated. Because like in Downton Abbey, you had the upstairs crew and the downstairs crew, and that was it, period. So you're mainly focusing on two aspects of one family. But in the Gilded Age, you have the Russell family, you have Ada, you have Agnes, you have Anne Morris, you have Aurora Fane, you have Marion Brooke, you have Mr. Rakes, you have the Scott family, the Peggy and her parents. So I don't know how they're gonna pull all this off, but they did get picked up for a season 2. So that was pretty much it for episode 1. I kind of breezed through it pretty quickly because I didn't want to like go on too long, but I'm just going to look at my notes real quick to make sure that there was something I wanted to mention that I didn't mention. So I talked about the whole like old New York, new New York thing. I talked about the training orphans to be servants thing. Oh, speaking of servants, Miss Turner. Miss Turner is the mistress to Bertha Russell. She is like her lady's maid. Not a fan. Mrs. Fish is the woman who threw the party in Rhode Island, and she's actually based on a real life person. Oscar. Oscar is Agnes's son. I don't like Oscar, and he's also giving this trope. I don't know if I should call it a trope because that might be insulting, but there's certain like Julian Fellowes like tropes that he puts in a lot of his shows. And one of them is like the closeted gay man. And it's unfortunate that the closeted gay man is often kind of an asshole, kind of smarmy, as in Downton Abbey. Like, you know, he hit the one from Downton Abbey, his character, I don't want to spoil it, but that's all I'll say about that because I don't want to spoil it. If you haven't watched Downton Abbey, I'll try not to talk about it as much. Actually, I shouldn't do that because maybe you haven't watched it. Oh, there's a mystery behind Peggy. Peggy's father was protecting her from a poor choice. So their father-daughter dynamic, something ruptured in their relationship, and I'm definitely wondering what that is. I'm thinking that it's connected to like a love affair or romance, because that's like the only thing I can imagine. Peggy wants to be a writer, and apparently she's not supported in that dream, but she is committed. She's a go-getter and she's determined, and she's actually my favorite character at this point. It is what it is. And Audra McDonald plays Peggy's mom, and from what I understand, she's won like 6 Tonys. She says, "We are all held fast, frozen in time until you allow us to move forward." Such good writing from Mr. Julian Fellowes. Such good writing. The costumes, the feathered hats. We got to meet a character, Mrs. Chamberlain, for like 2 seconds. I think we're going to be out seeing a lot of her. When Oscar calls Marion a dumpy spinster, I'm like, yeah. Pumpkin, the dog, he is erratic, but that's another trope. Julian likes to have his like little random dog situation. Yeah, I've talked about everything. Oh, Mr. Adams. Okay. So as I said, Oscar is closeted and he is in a relationship with Mr. Adams, who's like the great grandson of the former president of the country. And Agnes invites Mr. Adams over to meet Marion because she's trying to like get something brewing. And when she says to him, like, what should I see? He says, yeah, I'm sure that Agnes can tell you about like the museums. So he's not interested in her because he's gay, but they don't know that's the reason. And yeah, that's pretty much everything. Oh, we meet Mrs. Astor for about 5 seconds. Mrs. Astor was also a real live person in history. Mrs. Astor was known during this time period, the Gilded Age time period. Mrs. Astor like ruled New York for like 3 decades. Okay, Mrs. Astor was the one who decided like who was in and who was out. Like Mrs. Astor was the one who chose the I think they were called the 400 because only 400 people could fit in her ballroom at once. And like if you were on that list, you were considered like the creme de la creme of New York. So if you're in with Mrs. Astor, you are in, like you're just cool. So yeah, so Mrs. Astor's popping. So yeah, so there are a few characters that are real life people in history, and then there are a few characters that are like an amalgamation or inspired by people in history. I'm very curious to know who Peggy is inspired by. I've seen a lot of people say Ida B. Wells because Peggy is a writer, but we shall see. Because I, like, Ida was not from Brooklyn, so I'm not sure why people are saying that, outside of the fact that they're both writers. And you know, I guess the hairstyle that she's rocking is kind of similar to the portraits that we see of Ida in like pictures in print. So yeah, so that's it. I'm gonna stop there. Hopefully this video is not too long, but I'm gonna be doing Rambly reactions to every episode of The Gilded Age and posting them on this channel. So if you're into this show, please like this video and leave a comment letting me know if you're watching it. Are you into period dramas? Are you into historic dramas? If so, like, what do you like about them? Are you watching The Gilded Age? If so, who is your favorite character? And what are you expecting? What are you hoping for? And I'll see you soon for episode 2. All right. Thanks, y'all. Bye.